All right, so welcome again to our Employer Institute. So our first session is with Dr. Michael Preston. Dr. Preston joins us from Orlando, Florida, and I'll let him introduce himself in a moment. But so we are offering this first session about Generation Z just because we know that there's a lot of misconceptions about this generation, a lot of interest in knowing kind of how to recruit today's student, what to be, what are best practices for recruiting these students. And Dr. Preston's done research in this area, but he also has a personal connection to this generation that I'll let him discuss. And so I want to welcome Dr. Preston.
Good morning, Jamie, and thank you very much for turning the reins over so early in the morning for y'all in Texas. It's 9:30 here, so we've allowed the coffee to kick in. You guys are still probably waiting for that to happen. So I do appreciate your dedication to your potential employees, your current employees, and all of those students that you're going to be working with at Stephen F. Austin by joining us for this session. A couple of quick connections to East Texas. I worked at Stephen F. Austin for 13 years. Little fun fact, I actually hired Jamie way back in the day. So when you start talking about career development and career services, I guess, myself and Jamie were integral in both each other's careers as we move forward. So this is how this all comes full circle. But I'm currently the executive director of the Florida Consortium of Metropolitan Research Universities here in Orlando, Florida. We are a 3-university consortium made up of the University of Central Florida, the University of South Florida, and Florida International University. I get an opportunity to represent 186,000 of the most diverse students in the United States. And many of them are looking for the very thing that we're going to talk about today, and that is an opportunity at a great career. And we're learning so much more about this particular generation. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing my screen right now. And this is always fun, isn't it? Let's see if it works today. That's a slideshow, share. All right, we should be good to go. You should be able to see my our title slide here. And our tagline here at the Florida Consortium is transforming learning into talent for Florida. And we believe that universities are talent hubs. Unlike most folks who might argue whether or not universities traditionally are in the process of creating talent, I have a firm belief that we are, and our talent is what drives the economy here in the state of Florida. Just like in Texas, Stephen F. Austin is a major talent driver. One piece of information that I think is important for you to know, that approximately 87% of all students who graduate from Stephen F. Austin State University stay and work in the state of Texas. So if you are looking for great talent, coming to SFA and interviewing students who are graduates of SFA is a great opportunity for you to find talent that wants to stay and live in Texas, because Texas is a great place to live. So we're about the same way. About 78% of our students stay and work in the state of Florida. So let's see if I can get this moving here. I want to introduce myself a little bit. This is me in my cheesy professional photo. I was born in 1973 in Wilmington, North Carolina. I am a member of Generation X. So whenever we start talking about different generations, I want that to be kind of a sticking point. Yes, I was the disaffected youth in the coffee shop listening to Nirvana and talking about things like poetry and my feelings way back in the day, but I grew up an Air Force kid. I grew up mainly in Homestead, Florida, and Spokane, Washington. I attended East Carolina University, Southern Illinois University at Carbondale, and Texas A&M University Commerce is where I received my doctorate in 2011. I'm married to Nicole, who also worked at Stephen F. Austin for many years, and is we've been married now for 23 years. And we have our daughter Caroline, who is a brand new freshman at Mississippi State University in Starkville, Mississippi. So she's new, and she's my N of one. I'm going to talk a little bit about her experience as a Gen Zer later. I like to think I'm one hell of a guy, but here's one of the problems whenever you have a name like Michael Preston. If you do a quick search in the world, I'm not the only one. There's somewhere in the neighborhood of about 20,000 Michael Prestons when you do a Google search. They're all different. You can see how different we are. We are everything from football player. As a matter of fact, this Michael Preston here, he played football for a couple of years. I actually played for my hometown Miami Dolphins, and if he would have made the team, I was going to get one of his jerseys with my name on it. Actors, We have a priest kind of guy there, business people. And then this guy down here, this Michael Preston in the corner that you see over, people actually mistaken the two of us because he works in education reform up in New York City. So from time to time, I get his email and he gets my email. So we actually have two Michael Prestons who are friends. I bring that up because in many ways, Generation X suffers from this idea of narration, or Generation Z suffers from this idea of narration creation. And so what makes each one of our students unique is actually a challenge for employers to find out what those unique skills actually do to help employers meet their goals, but also recruit students to stick and stay. Generation Z is already planning on being one of the most mobile generations in history, maybe not by geography, but by jobs. They're not afraid to take different jobs under different circumstances if they believe it will get them the skills and opportunities to kind of take care of their families as they start to grow. And so as we start talking about Generation Z, I really want to think about what it is that makes my skills and my narrative unique. And then you think about what made your skills and narrative unique and how that is translated into the career that you've been able to achieve. Just a little bit more about the Florida Consortium. We like to think that we leverage the unique assets of Miami, Orlando, and Tampa Bay to develop talent, which enhances community well-being. We do that through a lot of gatherings, just like the one that Jamie is coordinating here with Stephen F. Austin, and that is getting our employers together to understand how skills connect with the opportunities that are at our employers' workplaces, and how we can help students become more marketable, not just so they can get the job, but so they can really be that accelerator for the economy in the state of Florida. And so that's our vision and mission right there. Some of the numbers here. Our three universities make up about 48% of the total enrollment in the state of Florida for our university system. About over half of the Pell eligible students. So our students come from first generation low income backgrounds mainly, and make up a majority of the minority enrollment. And so we really believe that we're transforming lives here in the state of Florida through the work that we are doing as a three university set. And I can say that that's exactly the same reason why I really was attracted to SFA back in the day, because that was exactly what SFA tries to do. So as employers, you probably find that a lot of the folks that you're trying to recruit are first generation new college students that might have come from a low income background. That makes them actually a little bit more challenging to recruit and are typified of the Generation Z movement, because about half of all students who are going to college now are the first in their families to go to college, and then the first in their families to have one of these, like what we like to call like a mainstream career. And this makes it a little bit different for our students. Some of our goals here in the Florida Consortium is to increase talent retention from 77% to 80%. This means more students are staying in the state of Florida and working, and that's good for the economy and it's good for our students. When students actually stay closer to home and work for most of their careers, they actually retain more of the money that they earn because they've figured out a way to assimilate into the lifestyle of that particular region, versus if they go off and travel and try and see the world, which isn't a bad thing, but it's certainly something that has financial ramifications over time. And then our second goal is to comprehensively curriculum map to help students attain in-demand skills. We're currently working with a number of different firms to where employers and faculty members are actually coming together, and they're thinking about what are we teaching in the classroom, and what do employers need, and do they connect in a way that is meaningful for our students as they're taking classes and then thinking about their careers. So with that little backdrop there, I wanted to get to actually Generation Z in the workplace. And we had to first start off by a picture that was made pre-COVID-19, because no one is clearly social distancing or wearing their masks here as they're meeting. So that's a challenge that we already have to acknowledge. And I've got some data that will show how COVID-19 is impacting Generation Z in the workplace as well. So who is Gen Z? And here's my N of one. This is Caroline. Caroline is currently a student at Mississippi State. She just got a 91 on her chemistry test yesterday. She was really excited. She ordered some insomnia cookies. She likes to listen to really, really dirty rap music every once in a while, and she drives her dad crazy like all daughters are supposed to do, because I often ask her if she's really going out wearing that. So she's a great kid, super talented. And these are the traits. She was born in 2001. So she was actually the first graduating class. Hers and some of 2019 were the first graduating class that fully grew up after 9/11. So that's something we have to keep in mind. Most of us think of 9/11 as this really important moment in our lives, but for them, it is just a earmarker. It's just a page marker in their history books. They don't really have any identification with the war on terror, so to speak. Their big thing before COVID-19 was the great economic slowdown in 2008, 2009, where many of them saw their parents lose their jobs, lose their houses, and in many ways have to rebuild their lives. So this is what they grew up with. That was their 9/11 in many ways. And now they're seeing this happen again with the spread of COVID-19 and the pandemic. But some of the traits, first, they're global. They grew up imagining a world without borders. And the reason they did that is because they are tech natives, meaning that they grew up with technology, and they can easily travel around the world using their computers in their hands. I call them our text toys, which is, the iPhone or whatever it is. And they actually see that the world doesn't have borders to them. They want to travel all over the world and see it. And we make that relatively easy with ways of traveling around the world, either by plane or other means. They're also entrepreneurial. In many ways, Generation Y, the millennials, are less entrepreneurial. They were looking for opportunities to work in a traditional workspace, very much like Gen Xers were. But more and more Gen Zers are saying that they want to eventually strike out and start their own business. And the reason they're saying that is because they saw what happened during the global economy crash in 2008, 2009. And what they want to be able to do is control their own professional destiny by starting up their own business. So they are reporting back to us quite often that one of the things that they want to do is incubate their own job at some point. They tend to be progressive socially. So most of, when you start talking politics, this isn't an election year. So we're not going to obviously get too deep into that, except for knowing that Gen Z tends to be more progressive socially, meaning that they look towards things like marriage equality. They are heavily involved in things like the social justice movements that are happening all around the country right now. And you're seeing this in the fact that many of them are willing to go out there and march. And then secondly, they're conservative fiscally. They understand that there's only so much money in the world, and they want to be able to manage that money. And that once again comes from what they saw during 2008 and 2009. They tend to be less focused because they can spend up to 10 hours a day on their devices. We all know this. They're the generation that will watch an entire Netflix series while also on their phone, Snapchatting and going on TikTok and all sorts of other social media devices. They value individualism and autonomy. In the case of my student, she is from a generation that has more only children. So that's the next piece than any other generation. She's an only child, and about half of her friends were only children. So this means that they have to actually reach out, not only have individualistic notions because she had to entertain herself at home quite often, but also she had better and more complete individual relationships with her friends and did not have as many friend groups. So you won't see them clustering as much, although it seems like it right now with all the pictures coming out of our colleges and universities, but that's not really the same thing, obviously. They tend to be multitaskers. They take on many, many different roles at once, and they're taught that. We taught them from day one that they have to be volunteers, they have to be good people in the community, they have to be AP students, they have to do all of these things. Why? Because you're never going to get into a good college and you're never going to get a good job if you don't do all of these things well. So they have taken on multiple identities and practices. Most of our Gen Z students will be the most educated, intelligent generation on record. I am someone who is a big proponent of the fact that if our next generation is not smarter than our current generation, then we didn't do our job. And so while we like to think of us as being old and wise and these young whippersnappers don't know as much, that's a lack of experience, not a lack of intelligence. I know my daughter at this point in her life is way smarter than I ever thought I was at 18 as well. And this means that they're very inquisitive and they want to be achievers. They can see what the future might hold, and they want to make sure that they can get there. Some of their concerns for Gen Z is climate change. Regardless of political affiliation, virtually every single student when surveyed believes that not only climate change is real, but it is going to be the defining subject and topic of their generation, and that if they don't change it, that unfortunately the climate will change forever, and they will not have an opportunity to reverse it. They are very much the most diverse and inclusive generation that we have seen. In many ways, they live their lives as if these barriers that we've set up along diversity and inclusion just don't simply exist. And so it's going to be an interesting next 20 or 30 years. They do believe very much in social justice, and they're feelers. They believe in other people's feelings. They think that it is important to consider that when making even important economic decisions. So that's kind of Gen Z. This is my N of 1, but a lot of this is actually taken from some research done by a researcher named Corey C. Miller, who does a lot of research on Generation Z and does a lot of speaking on it. So if you just Google Corey C. Miller, Gen Z, you'll see a lot of the same stuff come up. And I've worked with Corey on a number of different projects, and she's great in this space. So how does this translate into the work that y'all are doing as employers? We have to first say that realize that talent is quickly replacing tax incentives as the currency for economic growth in the United States. As a member of the Florida Chamber of Commerce, I'm one of their trustees, and Mark Wilson, our president, has a lot of great evidence here in Florida that as we actually increased tax incentives by lowering corporate taxes in the state, but did not necessarily promote the talent that we had here in the state, we didn't see as much growth in business and industry as we thought we would. It was only after we went into a talent first approach with our Jobs 2030 plan here in the state of Florida that we saw many more businesses coming to the state of Florida. And that really comes down to the concept that Mark Wilson has said for many, many years. And he's a vice president of Bank of America out of Tampa, Florida, that quite frankly, if you get a talented employee, they can actually out-earn what the tax base is going to be. And so he's always had that belief, and certainly has helped reframe the work that we're doing here in Florida to a talent-first calculus. And it's worked. Before COVID-19 hit, 1 out of every 8 jobs in the United States was created here in the state of Florida. Searching for talent, a short history. All of us kind of got into jobs different ways. And I wanted to kind of look at how talent was searched for and why it's going to be very different for our Gen Z job searchers. Of course, you see here on the left, the help wanted sign. That's the way that we recruited talent for decades. As a matter of fact, it's how I got my first job. There was a help wanted sign at Captain Bob's Seafood Restaurant in Florida City, Florida. And I literally walked in when I took the help wanted sign out of the window and said, "I'll be your dishwasher / busboy." And that's how I got my first job. But we really don't do that much anymore. The help wanted sign has been taken down. It was for a short time replaced with the classified ad, where you would get the newspaper and look in the back of the newspaper and try and find a job that way. Very localized, very hard to expand your worldview and say, find a job in New York City if you live in Dallas, Texas, because unfortunately you'd have to buy the local paper. And so that was the way that we did that for, oh gosh, probably until the 1980s and 1990s. I remember getting my first job in higher education at Stephen F. Austin. I got that job through looking through the classified ads in the back of the Chronicle of Higher Education because it was not online yet. Then around 1996 was the first online searchable jobs database. And it was not monster.com. It was another like Alta Vista website, if you remember how old. I mean, that just dates me right there. But that was the first online electronic searchable database. I know that Stephen F. Austin has Handshake and is a Handshake member, and you're going to learn a little bit more about that later on. But Monster.com was kind of the first commercially viable group there, and they still exist, but there's a number of different search engines out there. They tend to be less efficient in the long run because it's hard to match your skills with jobs. And that's why now we have a lot more complicated search histories, including folks that are doing a lot of their job searches via LinkedIn. They're doing it via Glassdoor, anyway, and also through Handshake. And this is because you can actually do pretty intense skill searches for potential employees, and students are starting to become more savvy on how to actually create their profiles in which their skills rise to the top based on what employers are looking for. So this allows for two things. One, it allows for a more personalized experience, which Gen Zers are looking for, but it also allows for an opportunity to narrow your search down, whereas in the Monster days, you would get maybe hundreds, if not thousands of applicants for a job. Here you could actually whittle that down pretty quickly to a very select 25 or 30 candidates for your job. So some of the disjointed spheres of Gen X, or Generation Z, excuse me, and employment. There are three modalities of how our students learn from, kind of learn career opportunities. The first is from their family. The best way of preparing people for the workforce is through their family experiences. It's where they first see people work for the most part. It's where we saw our parents go to work. The second is through business dealings, whether it's their first job or they're kind of working in the business world itself. So, the first time they open up a bank account, maybe the first time they go in and have to file a complaint with Kohl's because they had bad service. They can actually see business in action, and it gets them interested in work. And then third is higher education or education in general. So how do we make sure that higher education is actually leading to good jobs? We do that by integrating both family and business interests into higher ed, and it creates a much better Venn diagram that you're going to see on the next slide. But here's some of the things that many of our Generation Zers don't see. They don't see demonstrated work as much. Because of commuting, a lot of our parents would just leave the house, and then they would come home after work, and they wouldn't really talk about what they did for a living. Back when I was younger, I would often see my dad working because he was a small business owner for a while, and then he worked in a number of different other industries in which you would see him dress up for work, and then he would come home and his hands would be all messed up because he was working in a brick plant or something like that. And so because of commuting, we actually don't see our parents work as much. There's also a separation of work and leisure. We are very aware now of our time off, and this has created two separate worlds, and sometimes our young people don't understand the difference. And then there's a few examples of what work looks like at home. I mentioned that. And then formal education has replaced work-related education. And here's why. Here's a couple of pieces. In terms of young people working, the civil labor force in terms of job participation from 16 to 19-year-olds dropped to its lowest number ever in 2018. It was 31%. So 1 out of every 3 young people aged 16 to 19 had a job. By 2024, that'll be 25%. Here's the problem. COVID-19 has made that even worse. The vast majority of people who have lost their jobs as a result of COVID-19 and the global pandemic have been those workers who are under the age of 30. And so now, in many cases, those jobs are becoming the jobs that our young people used to take as kind of say a college job or an opportunity to pay the bills while you're getting an education, have now become life raft jobs for people who have lost their professional jobs that are 30 and above. This will create less opportunities for our young people to actually learn what it's like to put in a day's worth of work, and they're going to rely more and more on higher education to be a filler for that. So it's something that you have to keep in mind. If a new employee that you hired has never actually worked a job before, it's hard to expect them to know exactly what to do from the first day. And that's a bridge that that's a gap we're trying to bridge. Know that from 2013 to 2018, the US population grew by 11.8 million people, but jobs grew by 12.8 million in that same amount of time. And the labor force participation rate has dropped as well. So as we see the boomers start to retire, there's actually more jobs than there are people that are qualified for those jobs. So guess what that means? It might not mean right this moment because of the global pandemic that you have more people qualified, or you have less qualified applicants for more positions, but give it some time. And if you have the kind of jobs that I think you do, you're going to find that harder to recruit talent. Why? Because now students have a choice, because it's a buyer's market for the most part. And so we've done some surveying. NACE is the National Association of Colleges and Employers. They've done some surveys to look at what student expectations of employers are. And if you see, it's the opportunity to develop their skills. They do want recognition. Now, is this a trophy, as most folks like to say it is? No, not at all. It is actually, they want recognition that they're doing a good job so they know what a good job looks like. And that's what a lot of our students are telling us. They don't necessarily understand always exactly what doing well looks like because they've never held that job, as I mentioned before. They want an opportunity to have a job that helps to improve their community, be it through volunteer opportunities outside of the workplace or through the work that they're doing themselves. They like clearly defined assignments. They came from an educational experience in which we gave that to them for nearly 22 years. So it is hard to go gray with our students. They're very black and white. They do embrace diversity. As a matter of fact, one of the ways that our students are communicating with us is that they will ask questions of their employers of how diverse is the workplace that they're about to enter into. And if it's not very diverse, they're actually going to have second thoughts on whether or not they want to join that company, because they do believe social responsibility is part of what they are there to do. It's important to also note that while the salary is an important outcome, and you'll see that on the next slide, Generation Z acknowledges that they are more likely to make less than their parents. And this is the first generation in the history of the workforce to publicly acknowledge that they believe that they're going to make less money. And so with that, they actually want more autonomy and an ability to have a good career from an experience standpoint, because they just don't believe the salaries are going to be there. Some of the graduate preferences whenever they start actually looking for a job, they look for friendly coworkers. I mean, they want to like where they work. They want to know that there's some job security. Going through the Great Recession has shown that for them, they don't want to participate so much in the gig economy. We've heard a lot about the gig economy. That's a lot of millennial talk. This particular generation wants to know that their job's going to be there 3 to 5 years down the line, even if that means making a little bit less money in the long run. The other thing that they're looking for is good insurance. They have lived through an era of time where we have seen a reduction in benefits, especially when it comes to healthcare and retirement packages. This is something that they want to invest their money in, because they long-term would like to retire one day. They also do not believe that there will be Social Security whenever they retire. This isn't new. Generation Xers believe the same thing. And who knows, Social Security may be there, but they are trying to plan for that ahead of time. My own daughter, 18 years old, has already opened up an IRA and is putting money in it right now. She did that without me ever saying a word to her. She just has been reading enough to say that, hey, I might want to be ready for retirement one day. They want to locate in a diverse community. They do want opportunity for rapid advancement. Does this mean that they want to be the boss immediately? No. And I'm going to show you a little bit later on. What we're doing here in the consortium is we're building what we like to call career maps, in which our students, whenever they graduate with, say, their degree in engineering, they can actually see how long it typically takes a person with like an entry-level engineering degree, what kind of education they're going to need along the way, and when they can expect to advance. Is it 3 years, 5 years? So for them, rapid advancement is not a sense of they want to be the boss next year. They just want to know what that advancement looks like. And so if we don't tell them early on, they're going to get a little nervous that they'll be stuck in the same job for a long time. They are interested in climate change, so sustainable products and operations is important to many of them. And then if you look at this, high starting salary, less than half are valuing that high starting salary. For Gen Xers and millennials, that was up near the top. So you are seeing that our students who are graduating, who are Gen Zers, are really looking for kind of this lifestyle package a little bit more than necessarily salary. Some of the impact of COVID-19 on college recruiting, and this comes from our friends at NACE. As of the class of 2020, and these are our college students who graduated this year, there's a 20% unemployment rate as of June. That has improved a little bit, but not by much. 7% of full-time offers were revoked as they were graduating. So think about that. You just got out of college, you got a job offer, and it's been taken off the table because companies have had to make tough decisions. 31% of delayed entry level starting jobs. 22% of internship offers have been revoked. 46% of interns have moved to virtual. And they've decreased the length from 10 to 12 weeks to 2 to 5 weeks. So now the experience that they've really depended on just simply isn't there for the class of 2020. And it's going to continue in the class of 21. 90% of our employers out there in NACE have set diversity recruiting as a top priority. So this is good. This lends to what Gen Z is looking for. 61% will recruit at similar levels as 2020. Well, if it ain't that good, then it's continued to not be that good. So these particular classes are quite honestly going to be rather competitive for jobs. 6% will increase the level of recruiting, but you see 16% will decrease. So that's a net loss we think is going to happen. And then 47% will accelerate virtual recruiting efforts. This is something I've talked with Jamie about, and certainly something we're talking about with our career services directors. We are trying to increase the amount of virtual interaction so that more and more students can actually be recruited in an online environment. And I don't think that's going to necessarily go away after COVID-19 comes to a conclusion at some point. And so we are seeing a lot more colleges transition career fairs to virtual career fairs. Couple of other slides, and then I'll certainly stop for some questions. SHRM, which is an HR think tank, has said that there's 4 cornerstones for the future talent acquisition, especially when it comes to Generation Z. And first is smart recruitment technology. Because of the number of ways that our graduates can access your jobs, screen readers and skills matching are going to be critical in the future. So you might want to really start investing in this recruitment technology. It'll actually get you to the right candidates faster, but try not to replace that for the personal touch. Be willing to go in there and actually take a look at what those candidates bring to the table and maybe expand the terminology that you're using for those screen readers. Second, hiring for skills and competencies and not degrees. This is something that a lot of our employers really have a hard time getting past, is they think that they need an English major for, say, a writing job that they have at their say, accounting firm or insurance firm. And really what we're finding is that when we map our skills out with our majors and we match those to competencies that are needed for jobs, we find that a plethora of different majors serve that same purpose. The College of Arts and Sciences at the University of South Florida, we just went through a complete competency mapping plan with employers. And what we found is that students who graduated with women and gender studies degrees actually were ready and able to be certified as project managers for businesses. And this opened up a new opportunity set for these particular students. History majors found that a lot of the skills that they had and competencies matched well with what insurance companies were looking for in terms of hiring for their firms. And so, thinking outside of the box and thinking skills and competencies and not degree set is probably an important thing to start thinking about. You want to also develop a candidate experience. You are wooing the candidate as much as the candidate wants to woo you to hire them. This is a relationship. I often think of it like fraternity and sorority recruitment on our college campuses. This is an experience where it is a mutual selection process. These students now will tell you no if they don't feel comfortable with that job. They'll just try and find another job. So it's important to remember that candidate experience is really, really important for recruitment. And then diversity and inclusion is the key to profitability. Wall Street Journal recently reported that the more diverse and inclusive an office environment is in the state of New York and also in the state of Illinois is where they did some of their research. They found that those firms were more profitable than those that were less diverse and inclusive. And that just comes from the fact that people want to do business where they see diversity. There are 6 elements that Strata has come up to successful college recruiting of Gen Zers. And these are things that I'm going to go over these pretty quickly. And just know that I'll send these slides to Jamie so that she can send these out to you and you can have them. They're not proprietary in any way. And the first element is the idea of hire me. There's a couple of things here that I want to really emphasize. And first is better job announcement descriptions. And, you know, I hope that the folks at SFA will say amen to this because we did a search early on in my tenure with the Florida Consortium for jobs requiring a bachelor's degree. 5% of all jobs requiring a bachelor's degree in the state of Florida, when we did a search through Handshake, it came back as saying typewriting skills was seen as an essential skill for hire. Think about that for a second. Most of our students don't know what a typewriter is. The idea of hiring someone with a bachelor's degree who can type fast seems ludicrous. And quite frankly, for many students, it would be a turnoff immediately. When you review your announcement descriptions and actually modernize them, you have better searches overall. Another thing that is important, limit the number of essential skills you are looking for to maybe 8 to 10. I've seen job announcements where they list 50 different essential skills. Well, if a student is looking at that job description, they're going to lose they're just going to say pass over and go, I can't do all that stuff, because they take these job announcements literally. And so I would say that that's one of the areas of hire me. If you can write better job descriptions and better announcement descriptions, you're going to get better applicants because you're going to get a wider variety. Under show me, one of the areas I think is important is 86% of Gen Z employees, when they're hired, are making a decision on whether or not they are going to stay there more than 6 months within the first 6 weeks of employment. So that first 6 weeks of employment is critical, not only for the new hire, but also the new boss. And so that student might be graduating, they get a job, it looks great, they get in, it's not for them, they're out. And you've probably seen a lot of this. When you job map for the first 24 months for new hires, meaning that you actually show them what the progression of that job will look like and what's expected of them, you actually set up a vision board for that student to think about what that job is going to be like. They're far more likely to stick and stay over the time. And then you have upskill mileposts and opportunities along the way there, and they can start looking forward to it and seeing themselves at that company. And then help me pay. In many ways, a lot of our bigger companies here in the state of Florida are adding things like cost of living calculators during recruitment. So if you want to come and live in Tampa, but you are from, say, Atlanta, or you're from Tallahassee, let's say you're a student at Florida State, you can actually figure out whether or not the salary that is being paid to you is something that can be affordable for the region that you're moving to. We have found that in Florida, this is a great tool for us to convince people who have talent and think they have to go to California or New York in order to get a great job to stay in Florida, because we can show that their dollar goes further here in the state of Florida. Just like Texas, we're a non-income tax state, so we don't have a state tax. And it's also in many ways cheaper. We have less, our cost of living is a lot less here, even though they may be making more money in California, it's more expensive to live there. Fourth is help me learn. Our students in Gen Z like company-sponsored training and micro-credentialing because it allows them to turn to something that's familiar, and that's the curriculum. They were raised on education, and so if you can help them continue that education, it actually helps them feel more comfortable in the workspace. Fifth is endorse me. Over time, you want to extend career services, and this is more for our folks at SFA and Career Services, is that it is extending career services opportunities for alumni and perpetuity when businesses and universities work together to continue to train and reskill our students for years after graduation. That actually creates a better experience for the student and creates a better narrative. And then last but not least is the work-life balance. You know, this particular generation wants to work 40 hours a week. I know that's not always possible, but this is not, when you talk work-life balance, Gen Z is not looking for the roller skating in the office or the open concept. They do want their own office. They're not looking for office parties with pizza or, you know, a beer keg in the corner. Like, you know, we see a lot is sold as like, this is a great place to work. Actually, what they want is appropriate time off for life events, when they want to get married, when they want to have kids. They want to have an opportunity to take a vacation each year. They've seen their parents work themselves to the bone, and they, quite frankly, they want to work hard, but they also want to understand that they have a life outside of work, and we should be supportive of that. So understanding that flexibility is really, really important and increases productivity in the long run. So I think that's my last slide.